Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Newsbrowse News broadcast. Global news reports that Iranian-Canadian communities in Vancouver and Toronto are experiencing a mix of relief and profound concern following a temporary ceasefire. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump issued stark warnings, including threats to destroy Iranian civilian infrastructure and even its civilization, setting a Tuesday evening deadline. While the two-week ceasefire brought a temporary pause to immediate tensions, the community remains deeply anxious for family and friends in Iran. Human rights advocate Sushant Zangana condemned Trump's rhetoric as genocidal. In Iran, people formed human chains around power plants, demonstrating the high level of public concern. Iranian-Canadians like Regina Aselfullah and grocery store owner Sam Fayaz express both the temporary happiness of the ceasefire and the lingering uncertainty about what comes next. They emphasize their role in being a voice for those in Iran who cannot speak out, hoping for a long-term resolution to the conflict. CTV News reports that British Columbia may be heading for an early spring election, possibly as soon as next month, driven by a confidence vote on proposed changes to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, DRIPA. Premier David Eby's government plans to introduce legislation to pause certain aspects of DRIPA, a move criticized by former Premier Christy Clark as an attempt by Eby to get himself out of the mess he's put himself into. First Nations leaders, including Robert Phillips of the First Nations Summit, view pausing DRIPA as a significant setback for reconciliation, arguing it undermines Indigenous rights, with the NDP holding only a one-seat majority, and both the BC Conservatives and the Greens indicating they will not support the bill. The vote's outcome is highly uncertain. The situation is further complicated by the fact that 3 NDP MLAs are Indigenous, raising questions about how they will vote. An early election would likely propel Trevor Halford, the interim leader, into the role of Conservative Party leader for the campaign, as the party's leadership race is set to conclude on May 30. This political maneuvering unfolds against a backdrop of declining NDP popularity amid concerns over Indigenous rights and a growing provincial deficit. CTV News reports that opposition to supportive housing projects is mounting across Metro Vancouver, driven primarily by two community groups, We Vote and the Let's Vote Association. These groups have been organizing petitions, rallies, and protests, notably contributing to the failure of a supportive and complex care housing proposal in Burnaby. New Westminster Mayor Patrick Johnstone expressed frustration over what he called disinformation spread by these groups, particularly regarding claims that supportive housing projects are drug dens. He noted that individuals, some not from New Westminster, disrupted council meetings with anti-drug messaging on unrelated agenda items. Jolie Trost, founder of Let's Vote Association, stated her group only opposes drug use supportive housing projects, advocating for recovery-focused models. However, her group's Facebook page identifies it as a political organization, despite Trost's claim of it being a nonprofit. Similarly, We Vote, which describes itself as non-political, has an organizer pictured with a provincial Conservative candidate. Both groups recently spoke against a motion to reverse a pause on net new supportive housing in Vancouver. Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs Christine Boyle emphasized the importance of respectful, fact-based discussions rooted in local community concerns. According to the Canadian press, U.S. President Donald Trump has de-escalated threats of devastating strikes on Iran, opting for a diplomatic off-ramp. Less than 2 hours before his deadline for major escalation, Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran and Israel. The agreement includes the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian military management, with fees charged to transiting ships and negotiations between the U.S. and Iran are scheduled to begin in Islamabad on Friday. Iran's demands for ending the conflict include the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces, the lifting of sanctions, and the release of frozen assets. This move follows an intervention by Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Gen. Asim Munir, who urged an extension of Trump's deadline to facilitate diplomacy. Despite the ceasefire, missile alerts continued in several Gulf Arab states and Israel, and a gas facility in Abu Dhabi was reportedly ablaze. Concerns remain in Israel regarding the agreement and Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile. A key casus belli is still present. Trump's earlier threats to target civilian infrastructure had drawn international condemnation, with critics citing potential violations of international law and war crimes. The conflict has resulted in thousands of casualties across Iran, Lebanon, Israel, and Gulf Arab states, causing significant regional instability and economic shock. The Canadian press reports that global financial markets reacted positively after the United States and Iran announced a 2-week ceasefire agreement. Oil prices plunged, with U.S. crude oil futures falling over 15% and Brent crude dropping 14.4%, although prices remain significantly above their pre-war levels. Concurrently, U.S. stock futures saw a substantial rise, with S&P 500 futures up 2.2% and Dow futures increasing by 2%. This agreement came after President Donald Trump refrained from his threat of devastating attacks on Iran, and Iran agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz under its military management. Earlier, market uncertainty due to Trump's ultimatums had caused sharp swings in U.S. stocks. The diplomatic efforts, spurred by Pakistan's prime minister, helped ease immediate tensions, benefiting Asian markets as well, with Japan's Nikkei rising over 4% and South Korea's Kospi gaining 6%. However, concerns about long-term inflation persist due to crude oil remaining elevated and average U.S. gasoline prices at $4.14 per gallon. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.